Hi there, it's Teacher Jocelyn. I have some stories for you today. They're both bird stories, but I didn't choose them because they're bird stories. They're just stories that I like. The first one is Raven, a trickster tale from the Pacific Northwest. And this is one of my favorite mythological stories. This one is from Native American peoples who live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and this is one of their old stories. So it says, Raven came. All the world was in darkness. The sky above was in darkness. The waters below were in darkness. Men and women lived in the dark and the cold. Raven was sad for them. He said, I'll search for light. Raven flew across valleys and across mountains. He flew along rivers and over lakes. There was darkness all around. And then he saw a bit of light far away. He flew and came closer to the light. The light was at the edge of the water. The Pacific Northwest is at the edge of the water too. The light came from the house of the sky chief, and it was shining. Raven perched high in a pine tree on the shore. Raven watched. He saw a beautiful young girl emerge from the shining house and go to the edge of the water. She was the sky chief's daughter. She knelt and drank some water from a woven basket. Raven changed himself into a pine needle. He fell down from the tree and floated on the water. When the girl drank again, she swallowed the pine needle. After a time, the girl gave birth to a child, and the child was small and dark with shiny black hair and tiny black eyes. Who do you think the child was? It was Raven. Raven had been reborn as a boy child. The sky chief was delighted with his daughter's child. He called him his grandchild, and he played with the boy and carved toys for him. He invited the elders to come and see the curious, wonderful child. The elders gathered in the shining house with the sky chief and his daughter. They watched the raven child crawl around the floor of the lodge. He pretended to be playing, but all the time he was trying to find out where the light was hidden. He saw a box in the corner of the lodge. The box was large. It was carved and painted with many colors. The box was bright. It glowed. Ravenchild said, "Gah, gah." "What do you want?" asked his mother. Ravenchild said, "Gah, gah," and he began to cry. "What does the child want?" said the elders. Ravenchild said, "Gah, gah," and he cried and cried. "My grandchild wants the box," said the sky chief. The young woman placed the box in front of Ravenchild, but he continued to cry. She took off the lid of the box. Inside was a smaller box. She took off the lid of that box. Inside was a smaller box. His mother took the lid off that box, and light poured out of it. Light flooded the room. Inside the box was a shining ball blazing with light. What do you think that ball was? It was the sun. "Give him the ball," said the sky chief. His mother gave Ravenchild the ball. Ravenchild stopped crying. He began to play with it. He rolled it around the floor of the lodge. "Gah, gah!" And then he changed into a bird. "Ha, ha!" And then he became Raven once again. "Caw, caw!" Have you heard crows talking outside? Sky Chief, his daughter, and the elders looked on in amazement. Raven plucked up the ball of light in his beak, flew through the smoke hole in the lodge, and disappeared into the dark sky. Raven flew over the valleys and the mountains. He flew along the rivers and across the lakes. Raven threw the sun high in the sky, and it stayed there. This is how Raven stole the sun and gave it to all the people. And why did the people always feed Raven? To thank him for bringing the light. Sometimes when you're outside listening to crows, you hear them say, "Caw, caw," and other times crows say, They make a clicking noise, and that is happy crows talking to each other. Well, that's my favorite crow noise. I have another story for you today. This one is called A Mother for Choco. Here's a little bird. What kind of bird is that, do you think? It's kind of an imaginary one, right? I don't know of a bird that looks like this for real. So this is by Keiko Kasza, and here's how she looked when she was a baby. This picture has a picture of her when she was a baby and a picture of her when she's a grown-up mommy. And that's when she wrote this book, when she's a grown-up. But you can write stories too. Choco was a little bird who lived all alone. He wished he had a mother, but who could his mother be? One day he set off to find her. First, Choco met Mrs. Giraffe. "Oh, Mrs. Giraffe," he cried, "you're yellow just like me. Are you my mother?" "I'm sorry," said Mrs. Giraffe, "but I don't have wings like you." Next, Choco met Mrs. Penguin. "Oh, Mrs. Penguin," he cried, "you have wings just like me. Are you my mother?" "I'm sorry," said Mrs. Penguin, "but I don't have big round cheeks like you." Then Choco met Mrs. Walrus. "Oh, Mrs. Walrus," he cried, "you have big round cheeks just like me. Are you my mother?" "Now look," grumped Mrs. Walrus, "I don't have striped feet like you. Don't bother me." No matter where Choco searched, he couldn't find a mother who looked just like him. Yeah, it's true. None of these animals look like Choco, huh? But is that what's important? When Choco saw Mrs. Bear picking apples, he knew she couldn't be his mother. Mrs. Bear didn't look like him at all. Choco was so sad he started to cry. "Mommy, Mommy, I need a mommy." Mrs. Bear came running to see what the matter was. As she listened to Choco's story, she sighed. "Oh dear, if you had a mommy, what would she do?" "Oh, I'm sure she would hold me," sobbed Choco. "Like this?" asked Mrs. Bear, and she held Choco very tight. "Yes, and I'm sure she would kiss me too," said Choco. "Like this?" asked Mrs. Bear, and she lifted Choco and gave him a big kiss. "Yes, and I'm sure she would sing and dance with me to cheer me up," said Choco. "Like this?" asked Mrs. Bear, and they sang and they danced together. When they stopped to rest, Mrs. Bear turned to Choco and said, "Choco, maybe I could be your mother." "You?" Choco cried. "But you aren't yellow, and you don't have wings or big round cheeks or striped feet like me." "My goodness," said Mrs. Bear, "that would make me look very funny." Choco thought it was funny too. Oh my. "Well," said Mrs. Bear, "my other children are waiting for me at home. Why don't you join us for apple pie, Choco?" Apple pie sounded wonderful to Choco, so off they went. When they arrived, Mrs. Bear's other children rushed out to greet her. "Oh, look, it's a hippo, an alligator, and a pig. None of them are bears." "Choco," said Mrs. Bear, "meet Hippie, Allie, and Piggy. I'm their mother, too." The sweet smell of apple pie and the sound of laughter soon filled Mrs. Bear's home. And they're all playing together, too. After their delicious treat, Mrs. Bear gave all her children a big, warm bear hug, and Choco was very happy that his new mommy looked just the way that she did. You know what? There's also a little poem in this book right here that is by a different author. It says, "Nicely, nicely, nicely, away in the east, the rain clouds care for the little corn plants as a mother cares for her baby." And this is a Zuni corn ceremony saying. Well, thanks. That's my stories for today. I'll see you next time.